In an ever-changing world, a young leader has emerged, capturing the hearts and minds of millions. John F. Kennedy, charismatic and visionary, was not just a president, he has become a symbol of hope, innovation, and the fight for justice. Join us as we explore JFK's fascinating journey from his promising youth to the lasting impact of his vision in times of crisis. Get ready to dive into a story of challenges, triumphs, and the never-ending search for a better future. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, affectionately known as JFK, had a youth marked by charm and charisma. Born on May 29, 1917, into an influential Boston family, he stood out from an early age for his captivating smile and sharp intelligence. During his years at Harvard, he joined the sailing team and participated in various academic and social activities, where he cultivated relationships with important figures from the American aristocracy, forming a solid foundation for his future political career. JFK's brilliant youth was not only marked by his studies, but also by his travels around the world, which broadened his horizon and made him more empathetic to global issues. After graduating, Kennedy decided to become actively involved in politics, inspired by his father, Joseph P. Kennedy. In 1946, he was elected to the United States House of Representatives, where he quickly distinguished himself for his articulateness and progressive vision. His fame grew when, during World War II, he served in the Navy, where he demonstrated bravery by saving members of his crew during an attack. These achievements did not go unnoticed in public opinion, and in 1952, Kennedy won a seat in the American Senate. Every step he took in politics was accompanied by growing popular support, leading to a solidly built public image even before his candidacy for president. During his presidential campaign in 1960, JFK gave one of the most memorable speeches of his life. He spoke of new frontiers in America, appealing to the adventurous spirit of citizens and instigating a new era of progress. "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country," became a motto that resonated in many hearts. His eloquent and engaging style attracted media attention and motivated a large number of young people to empower themselves and participate in politics. This speech was crucial in consolidating his image as a leader and transformed the way people viewed civic participation. JFK's image as a new leader was solidified not only by his words but also by his commanding presence. He was the face of hope for many Americans, especially young people, who saw in him an example of innovation and change. His marriage to Jacqueline Bouvier, a charismatic and iconic figure in her own right, also contributed to the construction of his image as a modern and aspirational couple. Cameras loved capturing the candid moments of JFK and his family, making him one of the most portrayed presidents in history. With his focus on social and civil rights issues, he seemed to truly represent a new generation ready for peaceful revolution. The Cold War was at its height, full of tensions and uncertainties. The world was divided between capitalism and communism, and the United States felt the pressure to defend its values and allies. JFK, aware that the nation's security and the image of world leaders depended on his decisions, aligned his foreign policy with a diplomatic and containment approach. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 would be a crucial test for his administration and would reveal both his firmness and the need for dialogue. If nuclear war were inevitable, Kennedy thought, there should at least be a communication channel that could prevent total disaster. He knew that military modernization was vital, just as it was essential to gain the trust of the American people in such troubled times. The challenge was launched. In 1960, JFK entered the presidential race with a determined spirit. His youth and charisma were valuable tools in a political landscape dominated by older leaders. However, he knew he needed to do more than just be charismatic. The issues under debate were serious. He gained support by talking about education, civil rights, and economic recovery. Furthermore, his innovative campaign incorporated television as a powerful weapon. The primaries were challenging, but JFK's ability to connect with the public during the televised debates highlighted his public speaking skills and confidence, culminating in his victory in the conventions. The result was a young candidate who would explode onto the American political scene, shaping not just his future, but that of an entire generation. JFK faced his greatest competition in the 1960 election, Richard Nixon, President Eisenhower's vice president. Nixon, with vast political experience, seemed to be the ideal candidate for most, but he faced a dilemma. His past, full of failures and controversies, contrasted with JFK's clean and vibrant image. The young woman was Kennedy's main asset in debates and propaganda. However, Nixon stuck to his own narrative, defending the successes of the Eisenhower administration while also leveraging his experience in foreign affairs, particularly the Cold War. The battle between them was not just about policy, but about how best to represent a new era. Kennedy capitalized on youth and innovation, while Nixon appealed to conservatism and experience. Both candidates, therefore, became symbols of contrasting visions for America's future. The importance of television in the 1960 elections cannot be underestimated. JFK intuitively harnessed the potential of new media to connect with audiences. The presidential debates were broadcast live for the first time, and Kennedy knew he needed a memorable performance. The visual contrast between a healthy JFK and a tired-looking Nixon had a decisive impact on public opinion. While the media wrote stories about his impassioned speeches and approachability, Nixon's image was tarnished by his appearance and similar lack of charisma. This phenomenon not only influenced voters' perceptions, but also established television as a mainstay in future political campaigns. JFK not only inspired a new wave of candidates as the new face of the Democratic Party, but he also changed the way politics would be communicated, leading politicians to adapt to a world where public image was as valuable as the message behind it. The Cuban Missile Crisis arose in 1962. When the United States discovered that the Soviet Union was installing nuclear missiles on Cuban soil, just 90 miles from Florida. This imminent threat would be a crucial test for JFK and his administration, posing not only a military challenge but also an existential risk. The atmosphere was tense, and the intersection of political ideologies made the scenario even more volatile. Growing anxiety in the American population often manifested itself in demonstrations and speeches. Many feared that an attack on Cuba could trigger a nuclear war. JFK needed to act quickly, not only to protect U.S. interests, but also to maintain the trust of the American people at a time of great international uncertainty. Faced with the emergency, Kennedy convened a group of advisors and formed the so-called execution group, where various options were discussed, from diplomacy to military action. However, he was aware of the risks associated with each choice and decided to ask for a peaceful solution before anything else. He approved the appeal, and a discussion began about a naval blockade of Cuba. While addressing the nation in a televised address, JFK emphasized that national security was at stake, but he also made a plea for reason and peace. His carefully crafted decisions showed his ability to lead in difficult times, reaffirming his commitment to freedom while striving to avoid a potentially devastating conflict. Managing communications during this crisis became a vital aspect of JFK's strategy. Recognizing the power of the media, the White House decided to carefully control the narrative. As tensions rose behind the scenes, accurate and transparent communication was key to avoiding panic and misinformation. JFK and his aides kept journalists informed, allowing the truth to come out before rumors began to circulate. The president frequently appeared on live broadcasts, ensuring that the population was aware of the ongoing actions and their defensive nature. This approach not only helped cement the image of a strong and decisive leader, but also fostered a sense of national unity in uncertain times, while aligning citizens with their commitment to a more peaceful world. At the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis, diplomatic negotiations brought results. The Soviet Union agreed to remove the missiles in exchange for the US promising not to invade Cuba and to secretly remove missiles from Turkey. JFK not only avoided the worst-case scenario, but also solidified his reputation as a leader capable of navigating the murky waters of international politics. However, the crisis left lasting marks, creating a new perception of the nation's vulnerability and the risks of the Cold War. Despite the diplomatic triumph, distrust between the superpowers persisted. The legacy of JFK and his administration also included an increased focus on peace negotiations and the recognition that effective communication was as vital as military force, shaping the political landscape for decades to come. The fight for human rights began to gain momentum in the 1950s and 1960s, with many Americans rallying behind the cause of racial justice and equality. At this time, organizations such as the NAACP and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference (SCLC) led efforts to combat discrimination and racial segregation. JFK, aware of the importance of these movements, began dialogues with leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr., seeking to understand the urgency for change. The fight was not just about policy, but about human dignity, a value that Kennedy supported. Despite facing resistance, especially among voters who feared rapid change, his gradual support for civil rights began to outline a new era of respect and inclusion, reflecting a commitment to social justice and the rights of all citizens, regardless of the color of their skin. The March on Washington, held on August 28, 1963, was a pivotal moment in the fight for civil rights. An estimated 250,000 people from diverse backgrounds gathered at the Lincoln Memorial to demand equality and justice. JFK, even though he was not one of the organizers, followed the event closely and recognized its impact. The massive presence of people, united by a common ideal, highlighted the urgency of social change. During this historic march, Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, which echoed across the country and beyond. The peaceful resolve demonstrated by the participants impressed the nation and awakened a sense of responsibility in the Kennedy administration. Growing public support for civil rights demands pressured the government to act, reflecting a clamor for legislative reforms that could finally eliminate racial discrimination. The impact of Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech reverberated across the country and the world, becoming a landmark in civil rights history. The eloquence and passion with which King expressed his vision of a future where everyone would be judged by character and not the color of their skin galvanized hearts and minds. The speech was broadcast on radio and television stations, reaching millions of Americans. Senator Kennedy, who was attending the event, recognized that it was a potent call to action and subsequently stepped up his support for legislative measures that promote racial justice. The speech inflated the movement, leading to an increase in activism and engagement in African American communities. King became an icon, and his message both inspired those fighting oppression and pressured the government to fulfill its promises of equal rights. The legacy in the civil rights movement that followed the March on Washington and Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech has become an indelible landmark in American history. With the social climate brightening, JFK finally committed to supporting and promoting civil rights legislation. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 emerged as direct consequences of this movement, helping to dismantle legal segregation and guarantee voting rights. The work of King and other leaders inspired not only the African American population, but also citizens of all backgrounds, becoming a universal symbol of the pursuit of justice. The fight for racial equality left a vital impact on American society, shaping political and social debates for decades to come, while King's speech remains a hope for those seeking a more just and equal world. The challenges of the space age represented an exciting new phase for the United States, especially under the presidency of JFK. In the midst of the Cold War, the space race with the Soviet Union intensified after the launch of Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, in 1957. JFK, aware of the importance of demonstrating American technological superiority, demanded that the country not only compete, but surpass Soviet achievements. Challenges such as the creation of rocket technology, the need to maintain security and involve public opinion were crucial aspects. The world watched anxiously, and NASA's every step was not only a scientific achievement, but a symbol of freedom and leadership in times of increasing international tension. The goal of landing a man on the moon became the banner of the Kennedy administration, symbolizing not just a technical goal, but a call for national unity. In 1961, JFK buried his ambition to send an astronaut to the moon by the end of the decade, inspiring hope and a sense of purpose. He saw this goal as a means of galvanizing the nation's strength, mobilizing talents and resources toward a common goal. This aspiration not only fueled scientific advancement, but also sparked enthusiasm among young people who saw space exploration as an extension of the freedom and innovation that Kennedy championed. The call to action was not simply about conquering space, but about expanding humanity's horizons by proving that rocket sounds could be heard beyond planet Earth. NASA's motivating factor was the combination of national ambition and the quest for global leadership. With JFK's support, the space agency gained a significant increase in funding and focus on its missions. The men and women of NASA were not just engaged in experiments, they were part of a patriotic effort that transcended technical barriers. The space race established a spirit of teamwork and innovation, with scientists, engineers, and astronauts united under a common ideal. With each new release, enthusiasm and expectation grew, and the political and social drought of the time began to be colored with hopes of a glorious future. The narrative of space exploration connected to the American dream, resonating from classrooms to families, making them protagonists in history, while challengers were faced with perseverance and courage. NASA's successes and technological advances have become a watershed not only for space exploration, but also for the everyday lives of Americans. The launch of rockets like the Saturn V, designed for the Apollo mission, revealed the impressive engineering and innovation capabilities. Each step of the journey, from rigorous testing to the first orbital flights, has generated a sense of accomplishment and national pride. These innovations have not only brought humans closer to the moon, but have also contributed to advances in diverse areas such as communications, medicine, and computer technology, influencing practices in daily life. The race to the moon has become a showcase of human potential, showing that overcoming challenges transforms not only a nation, but also the very nature of humanity. Involvement in international conflicts was a recurring theme in JFK's government, which found itself immersed in a world full of geopolitical tensions. The challenges were far from simple. The administration was facing different crises, from the Cuban Revolution to the dynamics of the dispute between communism and capitalism. The Cold War permeated his decisions, and the need to strengthen strategic alliances became a priority. JFK sought new approaches to circumvent conflict, promoting peace while showing strength, all within the delicate dance of international diplomacy. For Kennedy, each decision would need to reflect his vision of a better and safer world, where dialogue could prevail over weapons, always in the search for a global balance between American interests and the aspirations of emerging nations. The issue of the Vietnam War became increasingly disturbing as JFK's administration found itself forced to deepen its involvement in the region. The prospect of an expansion of communism in Asia was identified as a threat that could not be ignored. As tensions rose in South Vietnam, the president sought to support the local government, sending troops, advisors, and military equipment in an attempt to stabilize the situation. However, the human and moral cost of this intervention began to raise difficult questions. Kennedy, struggling with his conscience and political pressure, contemplated the possible repercussions of a prolonged war. As young Americans began to question and protest the war, JFK was challenged to balance national security with the values of humanity and justice that he espoused. Attempts at peace and diplomacy became the essence of JFK's administration regarding Vietnam, while wartime rhetoric often clashed with a more humanistic vision. The president believed that a diplomatic solution could prevent the conflict from escalating, and intensified conversations with international allies, seeking support to stabilize the situation without resorting to more military force. The idea of exploring peaceful alternatives permeated their decisions. Despite growing internal pressure and growing opposition to war, on several occasions, Kennedy turned to diplomatic channels, believing it was essential to engage regional and international leaders to create a consensus that was aligned with the interests of peace. His vision, though challenging, reflected a hope that reason could triumph where force failed. Reflections on leadership in times of crisis shaped JFK's vision, making him reconsider the role of a leader on the international stage. The weight of difficult decisions, especially regarding Vietnam, was a significant burden that forced him to confront his beliefs and values. Kennedy constantly reflected on his approach. Was force necessary, or should diplomacy prevail? Interactions with his advisors and world leaders became a field of reflection where the ethics of leadership intersected with the need to protect the nation. This critical moment in his presidency would lead him to understand that, in addition to power and strategy, true leadership also involves compassion, dialogue, and the ability to listen, not only to what his nation wanted to hear, but also to what other parts of the world needed to express. On November 22, 1963, JFK arrived in Dallas, Texas, with an agenda that sought to unite Democrats in a state that, until then, had been hostile to his presidency. He was accompanied by his wife, Jacqueline, and a series of advisors. The city was celebrating, and the expectation was palpable. Thousands of people gathered in the streets to see him, showing affection and support, a reflection of his national appeal. With his signature smile, JFK waved to the crowd, energizing the atmosphere. The visit was part of a larger strategy to strengthen political alliances across the country and reduce internal divisions. Yet beneath this image of hospitality lay a shadow of bitter polarization that would make the events of that day even more tragic. The events on the day of the murder happened quickly and unfolded in a devastating way. As JFK roamed the streets of Dallas in a convertible car, surrounded by security guards and supporters, the mood of celebration turned to horror. A few minutes after 12:30 p.m., gunshots rang out in the streets. The first shot hit Governor John Connally, who was standing next to JFK, while the second, fateful shot hit the president. The people around were in shock, and the scene quickly became chaos, with shouting and running. The security team reacted quickly, trying to protect the president as the car sped to the hospital, but fate had already sealed one of the darkest chapters in American history. The public outcry and reaction to JFK's death was instantaneous and massive. News about the attack spread quickly, and a wave of shock swept across the country. Televisions and radios interrupted their programming to broadcast the tragedy. Collective grief united Americans everywhere who felt betrayed and confused. Flags were placed at half-mast, and many gathered in the streets, emotional, sharing their pain and disbelief. The charismatic figure who had promised hope and change had been tragically removed from his post. Questions about the nation's security, politics, and future began to torment the American spirit, as leaders around the world sent condolences, recognizing Trump as a symbol not just of the United States, but of an era of ideals. National and worldwide grief was palpable following JFK's death. The Americas and other nations around the globe mourned the loss of a charismatic leader who had become an icon of hope. The funeral, held at St. Matthew's Cathedral in Washington, D.C., was a memorable event, crossing borders and uniting different cultures in grief. Thousands of people lined up to pay their last respects, and world figures attended, a demonstration of Kennedy's weight on the global stage. The days of mourning that followed were marked by a sense of desolation that gripped the nation, as many reflected on his legacy and the impact his policies had had. The tragedy not only affected America, but reverberated around the world, as the image of a visionary leader was replaced by the uncertainty of how the nation would move forward without him. After JFK's tragic death, the emergence of various conspiracy theories was almost inevitable. The murdered man generated countless discussions about who could really be behind the plot. The political context of the time, immersed in Cold War tensions, fueled speculation that involved everything from the Mafia to the KGB. The idea that a single person, Lee Harvey Oswald, could have acted alone seemed insufficient to many. Frustrated with official responses, citizens and speculators sought alternative explanations that connected the murder to a tangle of political and economic interests. These debates, far from being limited to an academic sphere, began to permeate the popular imagination, reflecting a growing distrust in government institutions and in the state's own capacity to protect the nation's elected leaders. The formal investigation into JFK's assassination was conducted by the Warren Commission, established by the U.S. government, with the aim of investigating the circumstances surrounding the president's death. After months of work, the final report concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald was solely responsible for the assassination. However, several gaps and controversies surrounding the investigation raised doubts. Security failures on that fateful day, as well as inconsistencies in witness testimonies, and the speed with which Oswald was captured, fueled a series of questions. Furthermore, the very nature of the evidence presented, such as photographs, bullets, and recordings, generated intense debate. The Warren Commission, while seeking to clarify the facts, inadvertently left the door open to alternative theories that would thrive in the suspicious minds of many Americans, perpetuating the mystery surrounding JFK's death and the political agendas involved. Over time, the figure of JFK became a powerful symbol, surrounded by myths and narratives. Many believed that the murder had been part of a larger conspiracy, involving several groups with different motives. The idea that the government could have a direct role in the president's death not only challenged the official version, but also fueled distrust among citizens. New perspectives emerged with literary works, films and documentaries that explored these myths, transforming JFK into an icon of resistance and hope. Theories ranged from conspiracy theories, which were based on factual elements or speculation, to in-depth analyses reflecting the socio-political climate of the time. JFK's legacy as a champion of civil rights and social change also became intertwined with these narratives, making his assassination a powerful catalyst for debates about power, freedom, and the relentless pursuit of truth. The influence of the media in the post-JFK assassination context was crucial in shaping public perception. The media, including television and the press, have become fundamental channels for conveying information and theories about what really happened. News coverage was meticulous, but it was also prone to errors and speculation, leading to a rise in conspiracy theories. The portrait of JFK, constructed through the use of the media, contrasted with the way the government presented the events that led to his assassination. Sensationalized reporting, along with the impact of new media formats, helped solidify a narrative that still resonates in American society. Documentaries and TV programs subsequently explored Kennedy's life and the circumstances of his death, keeping interest alive and increasingly challenging the official view of events. Thus, the media not only reported, but also turned the story into an enduring myth. The impact of JFK's assassination on future American policies was significant. His death motivated the population to demand changes on several fronts, especially in the areas of civil rights and international relations. Collective mourning resulted in a growing demand for concrete actions, leading to the strengthening of legislation that reflected the search for social justice. Kennedy's successors, regardless of their political orientations, felt pressure from public opinion to continue his legacy, promoting initiatives that sought inclusion and the protection of human rights. Political science became an essential focus, and the commitment to ensuring that marginalized voices were heard generated a scenario in which activism and civic engagement became more relevant in its own right, shaping future generations of leaders and citizens more aware of their social role. JFK quickly became a symbol of hope and change, not just in the United States, but around the world. The image of the young president who defended equality, the promotion of peace and social progress resonated with many, especially among young people who saw in him the opportunity for a better future. His life and death became a point of reference for activists and social movements, inspiring campaigns for justice, human rights and freedom. The ideal of a new frontier, which JFK proclaimed in his speeches, continued to resonate even after his departure, serving as a guideline for action and engagement towards a more egalitarian and inclusive society. This legacy not only impacted politics, but also permeated popular culture, manifesting itself in songs, films and speeches that reinforced the need for change and hope. JFK's influence on future leaders appeared in several spheres, especially in social movements and progressive politics. Many candidates over the following decades adopted the principles and ideals that Kennedy defended, such as civil rights and world peace. Politicians such as Bill Clinton and Barack Obama have cited the inspiration they found in JFK, recognizing the impact of his impassioned speech and his call for inclusive patriotism. The focus on youth, opportunity, and civic engagement shaped the way politicians across the country spoke to their base. Kennedy's memory was often used to galvanize and mobilize supporters, proving that charismatic leadership could still reverberate in the collective consciousness, bringing to the fore civic responsibility and the will to fight for a better future. Over time, several initiatives emerged to honor JFK's memory, culminating in the creation of the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum in Boston. This space has become a reference point for those who want to understand not only the president's life, but also the impact of his policies on American history. The museum houses a vast collection of documents, photos, and artifacts that chronicle the Kennedy era, allowing visitors to reflect on his legacy and historical context. Additionally, educational programs have been implemented to ensure that new generations know the importance of political leadership and social engagement. By cultivating a space of memory, the museum not only preserves the past, but also commits to inspiring new leaders to dedicate themselves to building a better future, reflecting the values of ethics, public service, and responsibility that JFK so defended. The 60s were a milestone of cultural and social transformation in the United States. Movements such as civil rights, feminism, and counterculture gained strength, reflecting the tensions and aspirations of a generation that yearned for change. Social activism was echoed in the voices of leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., and Betty Friedan, who challenged established norms and instigated a dialogue about equality and justice. These struggles mobilized not only youth, but also entire communities, seeking a more just and inclusive future, profoundly altering the American social landscape. Through protests, marches, and demonstrations, the voices of the people called for legitimacy, expressing a dreamy generation willing to fight for their ideals, to reshape society, and to redefine America's role in the world. The art and music of the 1960s reflected the cultural effervescence that permeated society. Artists and musicians began to use their voices as tools of protest and social reflection. The rock and roll movement, with iconic bands such as the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, emerged as a symbol of rebellion and innovation. At the same time, songs like Bob Dylan's Blowin' in the Wind addressed crucial issues such as peace and civil rights, becoming anthems of resistance. Painters and writers also sought to capture the essence of this period, promoting an artistic sensibility that challenged traditional conventions. Works of art at the time were permeated by the need to discuss and question reality, drawing a vibrant portrait of a nation in transformation. This creative mix became a vital component of American cultural identity, influencing subsequent movements and inspiring even more social change. Young people in the 60s were protagonists of a cultural and political revolution, motivated by JFK's progressive ideas and a burning desire for change. Many have thrown themselves into social justice movements, rejecting the conservative norms of their previous generations. Universities became centers of activism, where students discussed and fought for civil rights, peace, and equality. They formed groups, organized festivals, and engaged in anti-war protests, especially against us. Involvement in Vietnam, new media machines, and pop culture enabled a connection between different parts of the country, allowing ideas to circulate quickly. Young people became not just consumers of culture, but the driving force behind it, shaping a new future where their voices and values were heard and respected, and where the fight for freedom and justice became a priority. The changes in American society during and after JFK's presidency were profound and multifaceted. Issues of racial discrimination, women's rights, and opposition to war brought new dynamics to the social scene. The civil rights movement, highlighted by the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., galvanized the fight for equality at all levels. At the same time, feminism gained strength with the publication of influential works, such as Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique, which questioned women's traditional roles in society. Opposition to the Vietnam War also mobilized vast crowds, resulting in growing civil engagement that challenged the administration's narratives. This intersection of social movements created a more conscious and mobilized society, whose legacy and results of the struggles of this period are visible to this day, shaping contemporary America and its ideologies. The First Ladies of the United States have always played significant roles, often as representatives and defenders of social causes. Jacqueline Kennedy, JFK's wife, was no different. Her charming presence and sense of style raised expectations for this role. Jackie, as she was affectionately called, promoted cultural initiatives such as restoring the White House and supporting the arts. She was also a figure of strength during her husband's challenges, especially during the missile crisis. Using her platform, Jacqueline became a symbol of elegance and resistance, representing women of her time who sought an active space in politics and society, defying traditional stereotypes of their role. During the JFK era, women began to diversify their presence in politics, defying the limitations imposed by society. Figures such as Eleanor Roosevelt and Congresswoman Martha Griffiths became prominent voices, addressing issues such as civil rights and gender equality. The Kennedy administration encouraged female involvement, promoting leaders who worked on social issues. Additionally, the impact of feminist activists began to resonate, creating a space for discussions about inequality and women's rights. This era also saw the formation of organizations that fight for female participation in politics, creating a legacy that inspired future generations to seek equality in the spheres of political decision-making and influence. Historically, women have faced significant challenges in their journeys, especially in politics. During JFK's presidency, several success stories emerged that inspired many to follow in his path. For example, activist and writer Betty Friedan used her platform to denounce women's dissatisfaction in society, resulting in the formation of modern feminism. Additionally, Women like Barbara Jordan, the first black woman elected to the Texas Senate, began to rise and stand out in political environments. These examples showed that barriers could be overcome, leading others to mobilize and claim their rights, transforming the political and social scenario. These women's experiences of success resonate to this day, reflecting the ongoing fight for equality. The cultural and social impact of women's initiatives during the JFK era was notable and lasting. Women began to gain visibility in areas previously considered exclusive to men, culminating in changing perceptions about female capabilities. Jacqueline Kennedy's initiative to revitalize arts and culture reflected a recognition of women's role as agents of change. Events such as the March on Washington and increasing female participation in protests against the Vietnam War also contributed significantly to the visibility and defense of women's rights. The emergence of female icons in literature, music, and the arts has inspired a new generation of women to become actively involved in fighting for their voices and recognition, solidifying their social and cultural impact on American history. Lee Harvey Oswald was born on October 18, 1939, in New Orleans, Louisiana. From a young age, he stood out as a troubled student, facing difficulties in his social interactions and experiencing a tumultuous home environment. In his teens, Oswald enlisted in the U.S. Navy, where he experienced brief periods of discipline and personal conflict. After leaving the Navy, he moved to the Soviet Union, where he lived for almost 3 years, marrying Marina Prusakova, a Soviet citizen. His experience in Russia shaped his political views, intensifying his convictions regarding communism and causing a return to the United States with an even more polarized mindset. Oswald's transformation into a schizophrenic and dying character provoked a series of actions that would culminate in the tragic defeat of JFK, leading to an unstoppable curiosity about his life and motivations. Oswald's motivations are a complex puzzle. Dissatisfaction with American society in the 1960s, marked by racial conflicts and the Vietnam War, may have played a significant role in his actions. Influenced by his experiences abroad and fueled by his communist ideology, his discontent was intertwined with his personal frustrations. Furthermore, the realization that he had no control over his life when dealing with social nonconformities and professing his vision of the future, further accentuated his anger. Oswald saw himself as an agent of change, believing that by eliminating JFK he could start a revolution that could return the ideal he wanted for the United States. His inability to find a suitable space in his society and the need to make an impactful statement became an explosive fuel that culminated in his act of murder. The trial of Lee Harvey Oswald never happened in the conventional way. After his capture, he was attacked by the media, and public opinion quickly formed judgments about his culpability. However, his claims of innocence and his insistence that there was a larger conspiracy began to spark interest in an alternative narrative. 3 days after his assassination, in a Dallas prison, Oswald was murdered by local nightclub owner Jack Ruby, in an attempt to silence him and ensure that the answers would not be revealed to the public. Oswald's assassination spawned even more conspiracy theories, which would lead many to believe that the truth about JFK's death and Oswald's role would never be fully understood, perpetuating mystery and distrust about the government and its intentions. Media coverage during Oswald's life and after his death was intense and electric. Initially, Oswald was an ordinary man with an opaque past, but he quickly transformed into one of the most closely watched men in the world. The narrative constructed by the media revolved around his life story, his interactions with the KGB, and his political beliefs. The portrait that the media painted of the man who became a villain in the eyes of American society was fueled by theories, interviews, and expert analysis. Documentaries and films emerged, creating a multitude of narratives around Oswald. This attention not only shaped public views of Kennedy's assassination, but also ensured that the figure of Oswald would remain an enigma shrouded in contradictions and mystery. Reflecting the complexity of politics and society at the time, JFK's death provoked a wave of reactions, both in the United States and around the world. In the US, the nation went into a state of shock and mourning, as politicians and citizens expressed their condolences. Internationally, leaders of several nations mourned the loss, reflecting on Kennedy's importance in global diplomacy. His death was seen as a threat to the balance of power and world peace. Countries that supported his ideals of freedom and social justice demonstrated solidarity, fearing that the absence of such a charismatic leader would result in geopolitical instability. With this, the lament became an echo of the commitment to democracy and a call to continue peace efforts. The changes in the US government following JFK's assassination were significant, and Lyndon B. Johnson, assuming the presidency, focused on continuing Kennedy's legacy and implementing his civil rights policies. The political climate was immersed in heated discussions about presidential security and safety, leading to changes in the president's security strategies. Furthermore, the fight for human rights and social reforms was made public, reflecting the desire to honor JFK's legacy. Debates surrounding foreign policy also intensified, with the Johnson administration seeking to forge its own path through the Cold War, ensuring that Kennedy's vision would not be lost in the new era of leadership. The nation's mourning over JFK's death resonated in every American home. From the abrupt announcement of his death until the following days, people from all social classes came together in collective mourning. Many people wore black and lit candles, joining vigils across the country. The wake at St. Matthew's Cathedral in Washington, D.C. became a symbol of shared grief. In the streets, the silence was palpable and tears were shed in memory of a leader who had awakened hopes and dreams. Mourning also drew a new vision of patriotism, where citizens came together in a call for collective action, seeking a country that continued to represent the ideals that Kennedy had embraced. This emotional outpouring extended beyond U.S. borders, reflecting the global impact his leadership had made. The collective memory of JFK quickly solidified after his death, becoming a pillar of contemporary American history. Kennedy's legacy was exalted in lectures, publications, and tributes that reverberated for years. The political establishment implemented days of reflection and events that celebrated its ideals. This, among authors and filmmakers, who began to narrate the life of this charismatic president, creating a mythology that mixed deeds and dreams. The notion of peace and progress, present in Kennedy's speeches, became a banner for future generations, inspiring activists and young people. In this way, JFK's story remained not just a memory, but a motivating force that saw in his absence the renewed desire for justice and freedom, shaping the culture and policies that would follow. JFK's life and presidency have become a source of inspiration for many filmmakers over the years. Films like JFK, directed by Oliver Stone, explored the theories surrounding his assassination and the complexities of his rule, highlighting not only the historical events but also the emotional impact his presidency had on society. The cinematic narrative serves to revisit the ideals of the Kennedy era and provoke reflections on the legacy of a charismatic leader who still resonates in the hearts and minds of Americans. Furthermore, productions such as The Kennedys and 13 Days seek to humanly represent the daily challenges and decisions that shaped the destiny of the nation, giving dimension to the myth that arose around the figure of JFK. JFK's cultural legacy in the entertainment industry endures to this day. Artists, writers, and filmmakers continue to evoke his image and ideals in their works, reflecting a desire to recapture the hope and ambition of the era he represented. The ideal of a better future and the fight for social justice have become recurring themes in various media. Furthermore, her story is often used as a symbol of civic engagement and activism, inspiring new generations to fight for their own rights. The way JFK has been represented in art, music, and literature reaffirms his place not just as a political leader, but as a figure who transcended time, uniting voices for a more inclusive and just society. Books and documentaries dedicated to JFK continue to serve as significant sources of information about his life and legacy. Works such as A Complete History of the JFK Assassination and The Kennedy Family, a history explore both the family history of the Kennedy dynasty and the events that marked John's presidency. Award-winning documentaries such as JFK, A Presidency Revealed, uncover details of the president's life, his political decisions, and the complexities faced in his administration. These publications not only preserve the memory of a troubled time in American history, but also encourage continued debate about the relevance of its ideals today, ensuring that its lessons are not forgotten and its spirit continues to inspire the fight for social justice. The cultural icon that JFK became is evident in his representation across multiple platforms, from music to fashion. Songs that honor his life and presidency, such as Marvin Gaye's Abraham, Martin, and John, reflect the deep emotional connection audiences still feel for him. Furthermore, his influence extends to visual symbolism, with portraits of Kennedy adorning gallery and murals, capturing not only his countenance, but also the aspiration for a better future that he personified. JFK has become a symbol of hope and change that continues to resonate in popular culture, serving as a reminder of the challenges and achievements that have shaped modern America. The lessons learned from JFK's legacy are multifaceted and profound. Kennedy's ability to mobilize the masses and inspire young people to get involved in politics is a clear example of the power of rhetoric. His emphasis on compassion and unity still resonates in polarizing moments, reminding us of the importance of building bridges rather than walls. His vision of a new frontier encourages us to dream big and pursue an America that not only responds to immediate needs, but also promotes equity and social justice in all its forms. However, just as he faced challenges and criticism, we also learn that resilience and the ability to learn from mistakes are fundamental to true progress in any sphere of life. Historical understanding is crucial to contextualizing JFK's impact on our society and current policies. He was not only a charismatic leader, but a reflection of the nation's desire for change during a tumultuous time. Analyzing your decisions and actions allows us as a society to learn from the past and avoid similar mistakes. Recognizing the interconnectedness of historical events is vital, as each act of leadership has repercussions that transcend time. Furthermore, history provides a platform for analyzing the evolution of social and political norms, helping to clarify issues that still remain relevant in contemporary debates, such as the struggle for civil rights and social justice. JFK shaped contemporary politics by inspiring a new generation of leaders to adopt a more engaged and inclusive approach. His eloquent speeches, civil rights actions, and emphasis on international diplomacy showed that politics can be a tool for bringing about meaningful change. The way Kennedy used television and the media to amplify his message established a pattern that continued in later campaigns, where public image and effective communication became essential. Furthermore, the vision of a united and constantly evolving America continues to influence published policies, challenging future leaders to be more conscious about the impact of their actions on society and the world. What we can learn from JFK goes beyond the policies he implemented. It's about the legacy of leadership and public service he left behind. His ability to connect emotionally with people illustrates the importance of understanding and empathy in public relations. Furthermore, Kennedy's fight for equality and social justice is still pertinent in our society today. We must learn to listen to marginalized voices and integrate their needs into public policies. JFK also teaches us that every leader faces challenges. Therefore, honesty and transparency are key to cultivating trust. Resilience in the face of adversity and a focus on a more hopeful future must remain guiding principles for all who aspire to lead for the common good. JFK's life and presidency teach us the importance of empathetic leadership, the fight for social justice, and the need for unity in times of crisis. His legacy still inspires new leaders to defend a better future for all. And you, which story would you like to hear in the next conversation? We want to know which figures or events you would like to explore. What lessons from JFK's presidency do you think are still relevant to the challenges we face today? How can we apply these lessons to our daily lives? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any content. Click the bell and follow our next stories, because we still have a lot to share.